During a high school class project, my teacher told me it's unrealistic being a CEO. It's been my dream to be a CEO since I was 10, so I told her it is realistic. Follow me on my journey to learn what it takes to become a CEO.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Realistic CEO podcast. Today I'm here with Anthony DiStefano. How are you doing today, Anthony?
Good. How are you?
Doing great.
Thank you for taking the time to allow me to speak with you today.
Thank you for taking the time out of your day. So the first question I want to ask you is, can you tell us a little bit about what you do here at the hospital?
Sure. So we're a Department of Public Health facility. There's 4 public health hospitals in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. One is located here in Westfield. It's the only one west of 495. There's another that is a pediatric facility in Canton, Mass, one in Tewksbury, Mass, and then one in Jamaica Plain, Boston. So while each hospital is a little bit different, we are similar in some ways in that we try to serve a niche that isn't competing with private sector facilities, but provides a safety net for those most in need. And so here at Western Mass Hospital, we're known as a long-term acute care facility. So we have 4 units that treat myriad patients and acuities. We have a ventilator unit. We have a behavioral health unit with elopement risk, a memory impairment unit with elopement risk, and neuromuscular unit. And so my job as the CEO basically is to ensure that all of us as a team work together to help deliver the best possible patient outcomes for the patients that we have under our care.
So can you tell me a little bit about your journey to how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, so my journey is circuitous, to say the least. When I graduated from undergraduate college, it's now a university, Bentley University, I was destined to go into business. I wanted to be a business guy, Bentley's a business school, and I thought for sure I'd be in banking or finance or something along those lines. But I went into sales right out of school. Times were a little bit difficult in the early 90s. The job market was tough. And I spent I think it was about 10 years in sales, just developing people skills and how to interact with people. And at the time, my wife was pregnant with our second child, and unbeknownst to her, I decided I didn't want to be in sales anymore. And I left the job without having a job. Mm-hmm. And you can imagine when I went home and told her that, she was none too pleased. But fortunately, I was able to get a job with the state auditor's office, which is, I thought at the time, boy, what a great opportunity. It's business related, I'm going to have a chance to interact with a lot of different state agencies and learn some things. And I spent 5 years doing that. And right around, was probably, I would say, 2000, 2001, we did an audit of the Soldiers' Home in Holyoke. And the audit found a number of issues that were in need of correction. And shortly after the audit, I saw a posting for the chief financial officer's position at the Soldiers' Home. And I thought, I just did an audit there. I know quite a bit about the place. What an opportunity to get into management. And again, stay in that business realm that, I went to school for. So I applied and fortunately got the job. And now instead of traveling around Western Mass auditing different agencies, I was working right out of Holyoke. And since I live in West Springfield, it was a short commute, young family, it was great. And I had a good boss at the time and a good team, good peers. We really made some significant improvements and things were going along great. And then my career kind of hit a ceiling I applied to become the deputy superintendent there, and unfortunately, I wasn't selected for the job. And, and this is an important lesson I learned. I could have either continued to stay there and been a little bit disappointed that I reached my ceiling, or I could start trying to find something else. And whether it just was the grace of God or dumb luck, who knows? I won't question fate. The chief operating officer position at Western Mass Hospital came open. And I applied, and I was successful in getting the position. And that then opened up a bunch of opportunities outside of just finance. I got to oversee all of the operational components of the hospital, everything except clinical, because not being a nurse or a doctor, I didn't have the right skill set to do that. And so, again, with that opportunity to experience and learn new things and work with different people outside of just the fiscal department, I went back. I had my master's degree before I got the chief operating officer position, and was in that position for about 5 years, and then COVID hit. And my boss, who was the CEO at the time, was asked to transfer to the Soldiers' Home, because the Soldiers' Home, as you probably may remember from the news, had a lot of difficulties with COVID. So she was transferred there to try to manage that situation. And I became the interim or acting CEO at Western Mass. And then I did that for about 9 months, a year. She came back for a couple months, and then was promoted to the Bureau, which oversees all 4 public health hospitals. And so with her promotion, her position became open, and there was a posting for that. I applied, and again, was fortunate enough to be appointed the CEO. And I've been in this position now as the permanent CEO of Western for just over 2 years. And recently, the CEO at the Shattuck, which is a much larger facility, their CEO left to take another position, and I was asked to split my time between here and Boston. So two and a half days a week I'm in Boston, and 2.5 days a week I'm here as the CEO. So my journey, in a long-winded way, has kind of taken me a bunch of different paths and agencies to get here where I am today.
So the first thing that I noticed is you said that you always known that you wanted to be in business. Like, what was it about business that you knew that that's something that you wanted to do?
Well, I'm probably going to date myself here, but back in the 80s, there was a show called Family Ties, and there was this character, Alex P. Keaton, and he always wore a tie, and he walked around with a suitcase, and, he was a sharp kid who really liked economics and, business, and that was kind of in my wheelhouse. And so I thought, oh man, that would be so cool to be that guy, all decked out and, studying economics. And that's actually what I got my degree in. So yeah, I don't know. I think it was just a combination of some TV influence, and I had an uncle who was a pretty successful entrepreneur, and just seeing how he succeeded and the lifestyle he had, I think that probably is what turned me on to the business world.
So the first thing you said when you got out of college, you had a sales job. So like, what was about the sales that you yeah, this is kind of a job that's a good starter job for you?
Well, that same uncle actually owned a package store. And so he was doing business with a lot of the different, sales companies that sold alcohol, beer, wine. And he knew I was looking for a job because I was actually working part-time with him and part-time or full-time with another, I was actually working for the Department of Public Works in West Springfield. There's a summer job that kind of carry over after summer. And, he said, hey, maybe you should try, working with one of these companies because it's going to be a good way for you to learn the business. It'll be a good way for you to, build some people skills and see what business is all about. Because in addition to selling, you were responsible too for making sure your accounts were paid timely. You know, you had to collect the checks every week, make sure that, you know, they were fulfilled, the businesses were fulfilling their end of the bargain to the company I worked for, meaning we brought you the goods, you pay us for the goods that you sell. So that's how I ended up in sales, and like I say, did that for 9 or 10 years.
So another thing you said about sales is you gain a lot of people skills. So how were you able to gain people skills working in sales?
You know, like in any business, you have your good customers, you have your middle of the road, you know, customers, and then you have your difficult customers or clients. And someone once told me that the faces change, but the characters remain the same. So you're going to find good people, average people, and people that maybe need some improvement or aren't your best performers, no matter what you go into. And so it's how you deal with them, right? There's not a one-size-fits-all approach. You can be more friendly and personable with some, and then others, you need to be a little bit more matter of fact and to the point, and business. You know, that personal interaction may not serve you as well as just sticking to the matter at hand. So you have to learn to distinguish between the two, and then hopefully hone your skills to use what works to your advantage and to help de-escalate situations sometimes that may get contentious.
So and when you left your sales job, not having another job, how are you able to make sure that you stayed focused and locked in to make sure that your family can be provided for?
Well, my wife was pregnant with our second child, so children are a big motivator. You know, you have to be able to provide as best as you can. You know, fortunately, my wife was working part-time. She by far had the most difficult job. She had a job, and then she was a mom, which is a full-time job in and of itself. So, you know, it wasn't as if we were going to have no income or no insurance. You know, I did have to say to her, hey, while I look for a new job, you have to check with your employer to see if you can get insurance. So that was a big risk. You know, obviously, I would recommend to anybody who's watching this, don't leave your job until you have another job. I made a mistake, but it worked out. Luckily, I was fortunate. You know, the old saying, the best time to look for a job is when you have a job. It takes a lot of pressure off you. So yeah, that was my focus. My focus was I had a daughter at home, an infant daughter, you know, a wife, and a soon-to-be son. And so I needed to be out there trying to find a job and hustling to just, you know, get hooked up somewhere. And it worked out.
So another thing is you said you worked auditing. So like, can you tell me a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, so I thought that was fantastic. You know, at the time, I took probably close to a 50% pay cut to come work for the Commonwealth as an auditor. But I always thought, you know, I'm a big public service person. You know, I was one of the youngest people elected to town meeting in West Springfield. I was the youngest selectman ever in West Springfield, and that was before we switched to a mayoral form. So pretty much when I graduated college, when I came back, I knew I wanted to get involved in my community in a political way somehow. And then when I was looking for that job, that public service piece kind of called out to me that I wanted to be in public service somehow. And the auditor's office was just a unique opportunity to be a public servant, but satisfy that business curiosity piece. And so we traveled around to all of the cities and towns in the 4 western counties. Sometimes we would do some work in Worcester County, but there was an auditor's office out there, so we didn't do too much. But we would audit things like housing authorities. We audited each of the sheriff's departments in all of the 4 Western Mass counties. We did a lot of school districts. And then there would be some assignments where we would be auditing certain nonprofits that were in receipt of state funds to ensure that they were being expended in the most appropriate way, especially if there was a contract assigned to it. We would make sure that the contract was adhered to in both the contractual language and the fiscal constraints the contract placed on the agency. So it was a great opportunity to just learn. I had a fantastic supervisor when I started. His name is Bill Walls, Springfield guy. If he watches this, I'll tell a funny story, because I remember my first day in, and I heard him on the phone with his boss. He was calling him saying, "Hey, I got a new guy coming in to work with you." And Bill was like, "I don't want him. I don't want anybody new. I got enough training guys. I don't want them." And then, Bill and I worked together for almost the entire time I was there. He taught me an awful lot. There was another fellow there, Jack Devlin, who was a CPA, who taught me a lot. So any advice I could give is, when you have quality people that you're working for, learn everything you can from them. Be a sponge, Don't be afraid to listen. Don't be afraid to do the tasks, however menial, that if they're assigned. Most often, I think supervisors, managers, when they try to mentor or teach someone, they have to teach them from the ground up. And they're not penalizing you by giving you those menial tasks or what you may think are kind of trivial. They're trying to teach you so that you have a foundation on which to, build and grow. And both of those individuals did that for me. I've been fortunate. I've had very good supervisors, managers, and I've had some pretty bad ones. I think you learn more from the bad ones than you do sometimes from the good ones, because you know how you don't want to treat people, how you don't want to be treated, and what not to do. So there's things to be learned from both good and bad supervisors.
So how important is it to find a mentor that is willing to teach you?
I think it's important. I mean, if you want to succeed in anything you do, no one comes into anything knowing everything. It's a learning curve, right? So if you have somebody who's got those years of experience, who's got that skill set, use it, right? Not everybody is freely willing to mentor, because it's hard. In addition to doing what you're supposed to do, you're trying to teach someone else. So the startup of investing in that is hard, but it pays dividends, right? Once you have somebody that you can trust, that can do the job, that's reliable, it pays itself back, double. It's a home run. So, and I think you'll know pretty quickly as to whether or not your supervisor is going to be invested in trying to mentor you or help. But I think it's always good to talk to your supervisor too, and let them know that you would appreciate the mentorship or the sharing of knowledge and experience.
So why is being able to learn an important skill to develop your business?
Well, again, I don't think anybody comes in knowing everything, right? So you have to be willing to learn. And maybe a shortcoming of mine, I know my wife would agree, is that sometimes I'm maybe not as willing and open to learn. I sometimes still have that stubborn streak, like, yeah, I know, and think I know the best. But I have learned that if you do listen and at least remain open to other ideas, different points of view, there's a lot to be learned, right? We all have different life experiences. And, especially in a public health facility like this, the people we serve didn't have the most fortunate lives, had difficulties somewhere along the way, maybe came from some communities that I'm not familiar with or didn't grow up in. So to listen to others and to have others in the organization that had those experiences and probably most likely have more experience and knowledge in what these people are dealing with, some of the people, listen. I mean, there's an opportunity for you to learn some things, and hopefully, if you don't learn right away, at least be open to different methods of process to get the results you're trying to get, right? I mean, we're trying to either return people to the community or make sure that they're as comfortable as they can be to living with whatever disease it is they suffer from. And again, I'm not an expert in the clinical treatment, so I have to listen to the clinical professionals. And there's a whole host of therapies that go into making people whole. And part of that is, the experiences they had before they got here and trying to make sure some of that's still available to them.
So you've had roles in the C-suite. So you've been a CFO, a COO, and a CEO. So can you tell me a little bit about the differences and similarities of each role?
Yeah, so the CFO piece certainly was much more fiscally focused. We didn't necessarily have to, or I as the CFO, didn't necessarily have to have a broader view of the direction of the organization, right? My job was to make sure if the CEO said, hey, I want to go from A to B, what would we need in terms of resources to do that? Build budgets, hold people accountable to budgets. The similarity of any of those C-suite jobs is you're always involved with supervising people and working with people and trying to develop some synergies amongst staff, different departments to get to that desired outcome. So people management is always, consistent across all those different C-suite jobs. When I became the COO, the difference is that there I was involved in multiple departments. I wasn't just or couldn't just be consumed by the fiscal piece. We had a fiscal department. I still played a heavy role in that piece because the CEO at the time was clinical, wasn't as operational, certainly wasn't involved in that fiscal world. So she kind of depended on me to make sure that piece was covered. And then got the experience of other departments like environmental services, aka housekeeping. I oversaw social services, rehabilitation services. And while I didn't necessarily drive the clinical aspect of what they did, I ensured that those services were coordinated with other therapies to deliver as good a patient outcome as we could deliver. And then eventually, when you become the CEO, that becomes more, as my predecessor used to call it, vision casting, right? Where do you want to be in 5 years, in 10 years? You hopefully surround yourself with very good people so that the day-to-day operational pieces are handled, whether that's by the COO or by the CFO or the director of facilities is a title we have here that's part of the C-suite, even though it's not a C, it's a D. And basically, you're the quarterback, right? You're trying to make sure all those pieces are moving in the scope of the game plan and moving the ball downfield to get to where you want to be in the future. And again, I think there's something to be said by coming up through different experiences because you then have a better idea of the challenges each of your co-workers or people that report to you have, right? I mean, it's easy to lose focus and say, oh, I'm doing everything and, I'm so busy because I got all these people reporting up to me. They have people reporting up to them too. And not only are they trying to work with their subordinates, they also have somebody that they're responsible to giving or delivering outcomes. So again, experience helps.
So as a leader, what are some important characteristics that you need to have to make sure that you are a good leader?
I think you have to be a good listener. and not just listen, but you need to hear people, right? Because everybody comes to work with issues from their home life. Anybody who says that, as soon as you walk through the workplace door, you change into just Joe work. It's not true, right? We all have baggage we're carrying in the door. So you need to be understanding that everybody's not going to have a super day every day. They may have a sick kid at home and they're stressed about that. They may have some financial issues they're dealing with. Listening and patience. And I know sometimes, again, self-criticism, patience is a thing I constantly work on because I tend to focus on deliverables. I can be pretty black and white at times, like it is or it isn't. There's no gray, in health outcomes, sometimes there's no room for gray. We either provided the care or we didn't. But you have to be patient, tolerant, and meet people where they're at, I think is probably the key of being a successful leader. And then you have to be prepared to address situations that are uncomfortable at times. That may involve meeting with an employee and letting them know that their work is not up to par, that there needs to be improvements. But the number one issue when you do those types of things is it needs to be a private conversation. It can't be done in a belittle or demeaning way. But they do need to be made aware that failure to make improvements could result in either their dismissal or some type of a disciplinary consequence. And a lot of times I see people shy away from that because it's uncomfortable. And what they do at times is they then shift work from people that don't do to people that do a good job, right? And they're then putting more burden on their good employees and lessening the burden on their poor performers. And that's a recipe for disaster.
How are you able to have these tough conversations with these employees when they might have like a couple bad days, but they are doing good work as well?
Yeah, I think you have to be honest with people and you have to be transparent. One of the things I pride myself on is being available. My door is never closed. People know that if they reach out to me, whether it's through email, text, or they stop by the office, I'm gonna make time to meet with them, hear their concerns, and be honest about what the expectations are. You can't just be someone who meets with individuals when things are bad, because then it's like going to the principal's office at school, right? Sometimes the only time you see the principal is if you misbehaved. Those principals that walked around and kind of slapped you on the back and said, "Hey, good job," or "Geez, I saw you on the field the other night, you did great." That helps. So it's being accessible, it's being available, being honest, being transparent, but making them aware that if there is an issue, they don't know about it only when it's no longer correctable. They know about it early on in the process, so that maybe the first meeting is just, "Hey, I noticed some things aren't going as well as they used to. Is there anything we can do to try to help make things better?" Give the employee an opportunity to succeed, because every employee represents an investment you've made in your organization, right? Not to say that they're just cogs in a machine, but they're people, they're valuable, and you got to make them feel valued. And that's one of the things we try to do here, for sure, is we do an employee survey every year. And this year we got some feedback that, hey, leadership, we need to see you more, right? So we have, I think, a total of 8 managers, non-bargaining unit individuals is when I say a manager. And so instead of doing just quarterly rounds where we would go all 3 shifts 4 times a year, we split it up. And instead of all of us doing that, now there's 2 of us of the 8 that go out once a month and round on every unit for all 3 shifts to try to solicit feedback from employees. We have what we call Everyone's Suggestion Program, ESP, because we can't read your mind unless you tell us, what you're thinking. And it's online. You can scan a QR code with your phone, and you can submit your ideas, suggestions for improvement, concerns, or just general grievances. Boy, that person isn't doing a good job, and you guys need to look into this type of thing. So everybody has a voice, right? And soliciting feedback is another way I think you try to make sure that you're engaged with your employees.
So how are you able to make sure that your employees feel comfortable enough to give the feedback that you want to hear as well?
Yeah, so that's all about making them feel like there's no retaliation, right? And that everybody has to be free to speak their mind. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody's always going to be correct in their assumption, because we believe and we perceive what we experience. But sometimes there's more to that experience that if it didn't involve you, you maybe heard it from someone else, could somehow deform the information that's coming back to us. So there is some recognition that we need to be, we can't just jump on everything right away just because somebody says, hey, this needs to be done. If it involves people, there's due process, there's things we have to go through to investigate and make sure. But I think you need to show people results, right? So if you're going to get them to continue to give input, you need to give them a response to every issue they bring forward. And sometimes the response is, hey, we looked into your complaint and we didn't find merit to it. Should you have additional information, please share. That sometimes is the response. It may not be what they wanted to hear, but it was what we found and what we felt we could do or not do. But we made sure we responded. And I think we do a very, very good job with that, of getting back to everyone. The healthcare business is difficult right now in that we are really struggling to hire staff. Nurses and nurse assistants and doctors, they're difficult to hire right now. And it's a very competitive marketplace. The state isn't always, very rarely is the highest payer, right? The saying goes, no one goes to work for the state to get rich. If we're competing with Bay States and Mercy's and Holyoke hospitals, and our sister hospitals in Boston are competing with, Boston Medical Center, Beth Israel, the cream of the crop, we're not the highest payer. We have great benefits and things like that, but we need to be able to sell ourselves in other ways. And one of the ways we do that here is we're a smaller organization. We try to make sure everyone feels valued and that everyone is known to management, and that if you come to us with a problem, we're going to get back to you.
So I want to go back to the leadership characteristics. You said listening is important. So how is listening important as a leader, but also you talked about you need to be able to listen to learn as well. So how do those two go together?
Well, I think anytime you listen, you're going to learn something, right? And listening, but hearing, that was always something that was kind of drilled into me. Yeah, you listen to me, but are you hearing me, right? Are you getting what I'm saying? I can hear your words pass through my ears, but if I'm not really thinking about it, it may be no good. So I think when someone comes to you with an issue, and you're listening and hearing what they're saying, you're learning, right? Because they're reporting whatever it is to you from their perspective. And their perspective may come from a completely different place than yours. So I think you have to be open-minded. You also have to be aware of the organization in that, sometimes two people don't get along. And so you're going to have two people here, and not necessarily at the same time, because sometimes that can be problematic, but sometimes it's useful. There's your word there's my word, and then somewhere in the middle probably lies the truth, right? And so that listening and learning and then trying to find out where that truth is important. So I think the listening and the hearing leads to learning, and you need that knowledge to make a sound decision. And, sometimes you're going to make a bad decision or you're going to make a wrong decision, but you're going to learn from that experience, right? And people sometimes, they get paralysis from the analysis. They study something so hard and they're overwhelmed, and then they don't make a decision, and that's a problem. If there's no motion, if you don't move, you die. And in organizations, the same thing. If you don't advance and or evolve, you run the risk of extinction. And so those all go together, I think, in that as you make decisions, hopefully you're evolving. A bad decision is going to give you experience not to do that again. And it can be an educational piece, even though it may not have been the right decision at the time. Now, if you don't learn from your bad decisions, that's a problem. You can't continually make bad decisions and be successful. But it's okay to use another sports analogy. It's okay to strike out, right? I mean, what's that saying? You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. You got to take a shot. And you can't be afraid to ask for help. Even as the CEO, there's plenty of people here who are smarter than me and know more than I do. And if I'm the type of person who's going to be shy or not confident enough to say, hey, what do you think? Or, hey, what's your recommendation for how we move forward? You're not going to be successful. It's okay not to know everything. In fact, if you think you know everything, you're probably not going to be a good leader.
So in the book, Tony talks about the LBW, the long, lonely, boring work. So can you tell us a little bit about your journey and you having to do the LBW?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of times where I felt that the job was going to overwhelm me. That, boy, I'm a fake. How did I get here? What am I doing? I'm over my head. I remember feeling like that, particularly when I took the CFO job at the Soldiers Home, and the state was going to adopt a new accounting program. And I didn't know the old accounting program. I was brand new. And so that lonely, boring work was trying to learn what I didn't know. What roadblocks are ahead that I'm not thinking of, and interacting with people to try to learn that, and then going to trainings to learn the new system, and then trusting people that had been at the organization longer than me and relying on them for guidance. So while it may not necessarily be boring, it's daunting and it's a little scary. And at times it would have been easier to kind of just say, I don't want to do that. And we all have things we don't want to do. And we tend to try to defer those and focus on the things we like to do. But that, lonely, long, boring work, that's kind of where the sausage is made, I guess. That's where the work is. And that's where you need to kind of be prepared to dig in and muddle through, because it'll lead to good outcomes in the future. So for me, I think it would have just been mostly about overcoming that fear or that anxiety about learning things I didn't know and admitting I need some help.
So I have a couple more questions I want to ask you. So how are you able to balance your work life with making sure that you have time for your family as well?
Yeah, I tell all my staff all the time when, they come in looking for time off, right? That this is a job. What's at home is really what matters. We all have families, or we all have people we care about. you need to have a work-life balance. The commissioner at DPH has made that, aware. He's stated that multiple times. People need to take vacations. People need to make sure that they have time for family and downtime just to unplug. Mm-hmm. It's more and more difficult now in the digital age, right? We all have our phones, and people can get me 24/7, and you're getting emails, your phone's dinging. And it's hard to unplug. You're worried you're going to miss something. And you then might get into trouble because, hey, how did you not know that happened? But if you let people know that the organization, none of us are so important that our absence is going to lead to the destruction of the agency. Western Mass Hospital in one form or another has been around for over 100 years. It's survived multiple pandemics. It's survived multiple CEO changes, countless staff turnover. It's bigger than us, right? There's no one of us, no matter where we are on the totem pole, that is going to destroy the organization. So take that time. Get out, do something fun, come back refreshed. That was particularly true during COVID. Healthcare workers really were stressed out. There were no work from home days for healthcare workers. Every single person here reported to work for their schedule every day unless they were sick. Mm-hmm. Super resilient, and we tried to reward staff for doing that. We tried to make it as enjoyable as it could be, but they had to have some time. And the state was great because people couldn't take their vacations or their personal days. They allowed the usual caps to be exceeded for a period of time so that when things started to calm down, people could unplug, people could take time off. But I think it's leadership's responsibility, too, to make sure that their staff has some time to take their vacations. And we do, we operate with multiple unions in-house. Mm-hmm. And so we have to make sure that they get their collectively bargained agreement time off. There's no way around that. But it pays dividends for sure.
So the last question I want to ask you is, what's one fun fact about yourself?
Let's see. Fun fact?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if it's fun, but I'm born and raised in New England, and I'm a Miami Dolphins fan, so that gets some criticism a lot around here. Geez, I don't know. I think maybe that I have a good sense of humor. You can kind of see in my office that people take time to, poke some fun and have some fun here and do different things. There's always that professional balance about trying to make sure things remain professional. But I do like to enjoy, some fun things with staff, and whether it's small pranks or just some good-natured humor. I'm probably not as big of a stick in the mud as I may look. Mm-hmm. So that's probably, I guess, as fun of a fact about me as I can think of.
Thank you for...
Yeah, thank you. This was great. You did a great job. You didn't skip a beat once. You had all those questions memorized and right out there.
Thank you. So thank you guys for watching this episode of the Realistic CEO Podcast. See you guys in the next one. Peace.